Hello, I'm Dave March, and welcome to Land of Confusion, the Ricochet show where we interview members, by members, for members. And today, we're interviewing Old Bathos. But first, my trusty sidekick, Don Tillman.
You get the order right eventually. Yes. Hi, hi, Don Tillman. I'm here in my back porch in Palo Alto, with the aforementioned redwood trees. And yes, it's a lovely day. And here we are meeting with member Old Bathos today. Is there a new Bathos?
I hope not.
Okay.
We do have several people, Dr. Bastians, wandering around the site.
Oh yeah, there are several Bastians.
So
welcome to our little
the show.
thing.
And I believe, so we'll go by your real name, George. How did you come to find Ricochet? How did you end up here?
I don't remember, to tell you the truth. I think I just stumbled onto it.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, right? I mean, you've been around for a while.
Yeah, it's been a few years now. Yeah.
So you mentioned, where did you grow up and what was it like?
I was born in Miami, lived there till I was about 10 years old, and my dad moved us to Washington, D.C., and that was home. And I now live in suburban Maryland. So I've stayed in this area, most of my life.
You mentioned you did a stint in the Army?
Yeah, about 3 years. Other people were doing stuff in Vietnam. I was mostly in the laboratories.
Okay.
Hospitals. Spent a year in Arizona, just I guess in case the Apaches got out of line, and then the rest of the time at Walter Reed. So practically my hometown. So.
Yeah. What were you doing? Is this lab work? Is it?
Yeah, I was a clinical lab tech, and then I got moved to a research facility at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. That's where I finished up. So, and it was nice. I mean, it was a job that I could use to work nights. GI Bill. Went to Georgetown, worked in hospital laboratories at night, and wound up being a science teacher.
Cool.
And did that for about 10 years, and went to law school. And
what sort of science did you teach?
Well, it was a small school. Initially, I think I was the science department. Mostly I taught biology and chemistry. But I enjoyed that immensely.
And this was in DC?
School was originally in DC, and then they moved the campus to Maryland when they bought some more property. So
what's it like living in that area? I mean, being that close to all that US government goings on and stuff. I living on the opposite coast, I see none of that. And so I'm curious.
Well, I mean, I think for most people, it's pretty boring. They're federal jobs, federal contractors is for the most part pretty steady work, very unexciting, and I think that kind of sets the tone. For some years when I was a lobbyist, spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill. I mean, it was a little bit different. But even there, it's like anywhere else. I mean, there's a routine, there's expectations, and it's just a job.
No, I went to Washington once a few years ago for vacation and went through the Smithsonian museums and all that. But the most striking thing for me coming from Canada was the fact that the White House is on a street. All these buildings, people are literally parking their cars around these buildings, and it was just sort of so weird to me coming from Ottawa, our capital here, where it's much more laid out park-wise. So people actually were thinking of how they wanted a capital built. All the official residences are along the river, and in these beautiful houses, and it's just weird kind of being in DC where you're walking past all these people are obviously working in the White House, and they're all parking basically in the front lawn.
Yeah, well, it's gotten less familial, especially since 9/11. I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, I could ride my bicycle down Pennsylvania Avenue, and you could go up in the gate for the White House tours. You went into the Capitol, nobody cared. I mean, it was a very different tone, very laid back.
It is the people's house.
Yeah, and it was also just more of a southern town. I mean, it wasn't like New York or Chicago. Very different rhythm, but it has changed. Like I said, I think 9/11 more than anything else. And then of course the the riots and all that nonsense. I mean, that's made it vastly worse. I mean, a lot of barricades just haven't come down. So.
Yeah, just it looks like an armed camp, and it's like, guys, like I've seen some of your posts from the 60s and talking about what was like real riots from back in the day, and
Right.
like machine guns on top of the Capitol building, and to see and hear like you have 25,000 armed troops because of a couple hundred yahoos busted down the door of the people's house. I was like,
yeah, it's definitely an overreaction. Yeah, I mean, I thought for sure in watching the May Day demonstrations that somebody was going to overrun the Justice Department. I mean, there was literally a thin blue line, holding them back until reinforcements could arrive, and that was on Constitution Avenue. Thousands of people, very angry, much worse.
Yeah.
Well, I think the current administration is playing it up because there's this effect where something happens and you can't maybe not see that thing that happens, but you look at people's reactions to it.
Yeah.
And that sort of gives you a hint, an idea of what happens. So we've got all these people like faking this horrible worst case reaction. They're acting and make you think this event was really, really horrible.
Yeah.
No,
and even though it may not be
doing that. I mean, like people constantly referring to it as the Democrats' Reichstag fire. That's I mean, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And of course, if you look at the polls, I mean, a lot of people seem to think that the police are killing 500 or 600 black men a day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's warped perceptions seems to be the name of the game now.
Right. It does. And it's worse because the major news outlets are not doing actual reporting. They're just pretty much reading the talking points memo.
Right.
Yeah.
And because doing proper reporting is substantial work. Going out, getting the details, just checking the facts, writing it up, making sure it's correct. That's a lot of work. But if someone hands you like material on the daily journal list or whatever the modern equivalent is, it's much easier.
Yep. I mean, like you watch. I watched Glenn Greenwald since the election, and he's very interesting guy. Where he's definitely not a lefty, but he's like he's just going on and on about modern news journalists because they're like so terrible. He's like, no, you someone saying a mean thing to you on Twitter when you're at the New York Times masthead is not the same as when I was in South America and got shot at.
Right. Yeah, being criticized is repression.
Yeah,
it's very sad.
Right.
But I also have this impression too that looking at the news that there's kind of a selection process where you want people who are smart enough to be articulate, but not smart enough to actually question what they're reading, or understand the story. I mean, to be comfortable just delivering utter and complete bullshit with sincerity. It's it's kind of scary.
Well, they signed up for it, right? I mean, they probably knew what was going on as they approached that position.
I don't know. I mean, that's when I'm watching the news, and I do it less and less, especially local news. I mean, I just get this creepy feeling that I can't believe that you, as a grown-up with access to other news, and sources of information, are reading this and taking this particular spin on the story seriously. I mean, that's frightening. Where do they get people like that?
Well, I think it's part of their army. They're soldiers, and they're doing what they do, and they help each other. They have a multiplicative effect of them all working together, reading from the same talking points, however untrue they may be. And that unity of purpose, that reading from the same script, literally, gives you more power. It absolutely gives you more power.
It does give you more power, but then if people are turning you off, it isn't very powerful at all. That's the thing. Like you say, you're not watching it. More and more people are just going to get their news somewhere else, and now it's become like the New York Times. One of the reasons why I think the polling was so awful in the last election is because if you're 97% of the readers of the New York Times are like Democrats, they don't want to read what Trump's real numbers are. So the polling companies are feeding into what people want to hear and not actually what's actually happening.
I don't believe it. I think they were being funded to. They were getting revenue for polling a certain way, because, I mean,
well, yeah, but
if your campaign, if you're going to spend campaign money, spend it on skewed polling.
Well,
and
but you notice
no
there's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to the polls. I mean, and it's, in other words, the Republican numbers, I mean, the true numbers, how he's doing, only come up in the last week or so. I mean, in the month before, the 2 months before, the Republican is always getting slaughtered. And then at the end, and those are the polls that are a matter of record. That's how the pollsters are rated for their accuracy. Well, then it's okay. And at the end, to show it tightening magically as if something's changing, when actually I think,
yeah,
they
knew all along.
And if
well, I don't think they are rated. They don't. I don't think the polls, rated or not, that's meaningless.
Well, they rate
really.
themselves. It's like the mortgage crisis back in the 2008, where the big lending agencies rated themselves, and the same with the polling industry. They rate themselves. So, like Nate Silver is a so-called pollster, and he's running the list in Real Clear Politics. They're all running their own list. So when you get to regulate yourself, you can say you're always awesome.
Right, but like I say, also it's only the one before the election, that counts. So you can be off by 10 or 15 points the month before, and nobody cares. And
right.
and I'm pretty sure there's some bias there. But
now, if you want to look into, there's a guy called the People's Pundit, and he does polling himself. He's one of these guys who likes to get it right rather than be based on ideology. And he's done his name's Richard Barish. You can find him out there, and he does a show and he talks about.
You'll add a link.
Yeah, he has a lot of good information on polling, because he says one of the big problems, like he believes the whole polling industry has been corrupted in recent years because you never had a single Trump outlier. So all the polls always skewed toward Biden. You never had one where it suddenly was like Trump at +6.
Right.
And he says
Although
that's statistically impossible.
I think the LA Times poll might have been the best then. But yeah, the polling companies for politics don't have an incentive to be accurate, because they don't get more money if they're more accurate. Now, polling companies who don't do politics, who are doing like customer surveys kind of things, they do get more money for being accurate. So there's two different kinds of polling companies.
Right.
And whether you get more business, more money for being more accurate or not.
Well, I think it's the same companies. I mean, they just have different sidelines. I mean, when
perhaps.
When I represented some trade associations, I mean, we hired Clinton's old posters, Penn and Shane, to do some stuff for us. They were extraordinarily thorough. I mean, the most amazing thing about the poll that we couldn't figure out is how in the hell did you get somebody to stay on the phone to answer that many questions? But anyway, but they were pretty thorough.
Yeah.
The Nate Silver, was it 380, 485, 380, whatever. Nate Silver polls. I always thought those were crazy, because they would report the numbers to 4-digit accuracy, even though the first digit wasn't correct. And they did this both to make them seem more accurate than they truly were, and it allowed that changes in the numbers to happen more often, 10, 100 times as much, because it's going to that much more detail, which means they can they can get more eyeball clicks based on the numbers changing more often. So that was just really foul. They're not being truthful.
Yeah, so just get step away from politics for a moment. I was just remembering you mentioned something very interesting in your bio. You happen to have were a possible associate of Richard Hansen.
Robert Hansen. No,
Robert Hansen.
No, was socially acquainted. Our sons were longtime classmates, and he was at my house a couple of times. We even went to a few social functions together. And
okay, I don't know who Robert Hansen is.
The FBI spy.
He sold out about 24 American agents to the Russians.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. I'll be damned.
Yeah, it was. I guess wouldn't that be 92? In April, he was at my house, and I was kidding him because the wall had just come down, and the Berlin Wall, and I figured, well, that's it. Soviet Union's gone, and I said, you must be, out of a job. You're gonna have to transfer some, right? Because the Ruskies are no longer commies. And I thought I was just being funny. He got kind of pissed off, and his response was, no, they're still at it. The bad guys are still doing the same thing, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. But I guess it had an impact on his side and income, but
yeah.
But anyway, if I had to make a list at that time of everybody I knew and to rank them according to their probability of ever being a commie spy, I mean, he would have been the anchor on one end, because the guy was like slightly to the right of Moses on most things, and it was an incredible shock when I saw his face on the news.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't look like he was ideologically motivated. It was all about, like, he wanted to prove himself. One of those people who passed over for jobs and wanted to prove himself smarter than his boss.
Yeah, there was a lot of that going on, but just a much stranger guy than any of us realized.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize. So that's Clarence. He's my parrot. He's a little annoyed.
Oh.
This is usually his personal time, and we're infringing on that. So.
Oh,
okay.
Clarence has quite the bark.
No, that's Sabo. He's not coming in the room. Let me deal with him.
No. Don't bring him in. In a frame. No, we want to see the animals.
We'll certainly be asking questions about the parrot, don't you worry.
Sabo is visiting. He's my daughter's dog, and the parrot is jealous of the attention, and they're both competing to see who can be the watch animal. So now, if there's anything outside, they take turns being the first one to start hollering. And
Okay.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Bring him on camera. Come on.
Let's see what kind of mood he's in. All right. Here.
Awesome.
All right.
You want to say hi to everybody? No.
Oh, this is good.
Yeah, he's been kind of moody. You happy now? Yeah. Okay. Good.
Oh, this is great. You look like a damn pirate.
So how long have you been, is this your first parrot, or have you had many parrots over the years?
This is the second one. He's now pushing what are you about 19, 20 years old now, right? Yeah. So
What made you get involved with having the birds?
I don't know. I've always been into birds. I mean, I guess when I was a little bit younger, my hearing was better. I could probably do 50 species by ear, and we used to spend a lot of time bird watching. So, yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
You need this bird on every Zoom call. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as he's not ticked off and trying to bite me because he's not getting anything to eat. So.
That's great.
Yeah. I once was taking ballroom dance lessons, and I couldn't find the spot to where it was supposed to be. So I went and I was walking through the recreation hall, and I walked in and knocked on the door. The door opened. There was like 15 people, each with parrots. And there's some sort of local parrots lover society, and they told me where I had to go, but it was just like, wow, there's like, this was not what I expected when I opened this door.
That's great. I'm loving the parrot.
So,
Awesome.
so you mentioned that you've also, as a lawyer, your amicus brief was cited by one Anton Scalia.
Yeah, we just in a footnote. I mean, we were on the winning side. He had dissented, and he was taking note of my economic theory in the paper, which I'm sure he disagreed with. And I mean, it was a antitrust case, a tying case. And if you are a pure marketeer, you really don't believe that tying makes a difference in antitrust. And and our clients were arguing that it did. And anyway, we won the case, and I didn't care as much about that as I did the fact that Scalia read my brief and I mentioned it in a footnote. So there it is.
It's like the first time I got cited, found out I was cited on Wikipedia. I was like, wait, what?
Oh, very nice.
What else is there? You also worked at National Review and First Things.
Yes. I'll see those back. Yeah.
Bring it on.
I knew Cato Byrne. Get out of here. What are you doing? Yeah. Shake here. I knew Cato Byrne, and she asked me to write a paper about.
Great.
He walks with the
write a
animals.
paper about the Gingrich ethics charges, and an article on that, and that's what they ran. And I did some mostly humor pieces for First Things way back when. So.
Okay. What kind of humorous things?
Well, I did. I think the first one I did was on why the cowbird should be the national bird instead of the bald eagle, and mostly because it leaves its young in the nest of others to be raised. But and there was on I think did one on McKinnon and monkeys and Adam and Eve. Had some fun with that. Anyway, they I think I did four or five for them. It was fun.
Interesting. You worked in law and economics, public choice clerk. Those were big things for you as a lawyer?
No, it was in law school. It was wonderful. I mean, just as an intellectual eye opener. I went to law school at George Mason, and so public choice was a big thing. My torts and contracts professors were law and economics guys, so that's a very different perspective and refreshing, very interesting. So anyway, that had a profound influence, less on my practice and a lot more on my thinking and writing and reading. So.
And you've gotten into what is it? You are interested in the psychological and other underpinnings of political dispositions. You were mentioning that here. Yeah,
it comes up a lot in the stuff that I toss up on Ricochet, and that is that, it's not so much the specifics of political positions, it is what shapes the dispositions that causes people to gravitate toward that. And there are not just psychological, but characterological issues involved. And I've made myself unpopular with some conservative friends who've made a good living operating 100% on that cognitive level. In other words, making, very detailed arguments about the importance of the family and the market. And I would try to make the point that absolutely none of that matters if we are creating and forming people who aren't capable of making judgments on the basis of the merits of those kinds of arguments. In other words, if we don't address that other level, this is all a waste of time. And that's what I meant by that remark.
Okay.
What do you think are the basis for these judgments then?
Well, I mean, and the thing I threw up there today about the Bill of Rights. I mean, the mindset of the founders the guy that they had in mind when they wrote the Bill of Rights was somebody who was motivated by conscience, right? The most important thing is I don't want the government or anybody else telling me what I have to believe or how I have to worship. I don't want anybody telling me I have to be quiet, you know, if there's a lie out there and I want to address it. The Second Amendment was also moral. I have a moral obligation to protect my family, my community, you know, my neighbors. That's why I have a gun. It's an extension of these moral obligations. I mean, it was a very different point of view. And I don't think, you know, I don't think we're producing people who feel that same moral compunction. I think if you're talking about your feelings and what you're entitled to, you develop a perspective where you're not worried about the government interfering with conscience. You're just worried about being hassled. And it's a very, very different point of view.
Actually, it's very interesting. The Bill of Rights is, you know, first 10 amendments of the Constitution are really nothing like the actual Constitution, right? I mean, the actual Constitution says how the government's going to work, and the Bill of Rights says what the government can't do.
Yes, you're right.
And that's very different. It's, I guess that's the reason it is the Bill of Rights.
It is written by two different groups of people.
Yes, with different intent.
Yeah,
clearly, and indeed, and right, because the Bill of Rights says almost nothing about how the mechanisms of government operate internally, and that's entirely what the Constitution does.
Right, but in other words, the context was there were a whole bunch of guys who said that, you know, we don't really want this other thing that you're setting up unless we have some guarantees, you know,
right.
because this is what it's about. If it doesn't do this, we don't want it. And so, I mean, it wasn't so much an add-on; it was a precondition for accepting the rest of it. I think is the way a lot of people look at it.
It was written mainly by the anti-federalists who didn't want to have a federal constitution. They were happy with the way the Confederation worked,
right?
Or because it didn't work.
But anyway, I mean, just looking at the way, you know, the woke people, you know, seem to think about things. I mean, you kind of supplant, you know, conscience and as it's, you know, previously understood for, you know, this weird new religion, which is really what it is.
Well, yeah. Well, I mentioned before in other episodes, I think the left is less ideological, less foundational political beliefs, and more just gaining power. And whatever positions on whatever issues you take, whatever it's to get more power. And if you look at it that way, everything makes sense. Everything just falls into place exactly.
Well, that's true to a point. I mean, certainly that explains, you know, Pelosi and Schumer, you know, about 99% of the time. But the kind of people who are tweeting, you know, about Black Lives Matter, that's more of a religious thing. And the goofiness, you know, I see on campuses. I mean, the power is an entitlement for being right. I mean, it's not an end in itself as it is for some politicians.
Right. Well, yeah. So we have like two different classes on the left, right? We have the people who are politicians and who are working inside the Democratic Party organization. They're in that power. And then there's the people who just happen to vote Democrat. And I think there's a wild difference between them.
Yeah.
And because the folks on this side here are doing it, they're running a machine. They're making a lot of money, and they're getting a lot of power, building up bureaucracy.
And that's what I'm hearing. I just want to interject a second. That's why HR1 is going, from what I can tell, is going to fail, is because it gets rid of all that power, all these infrastructure in the states and all these cushy positions that Democrats and Republicans give out to each other. And it federalizes it. And all those people don't want to lose their jobs.
Right. Right. So yeah, that's a good way to. So I mean, the way to win over them is to take away their revenue from bureaucracies and such that are open to graft, because and that's how they do it.
Well,
So yeah,
I mean,
and
defunding
then
those people would be extremely important. There's no question about that. But my longer term concern is that you have an entire generation which does not have a frame of reference which is conducive to, our understanding of the Constitution. And that to me is far scarier than how much money Nancy Pelosi can steal for Planned Parenthood next year.
Yeah.
Right. It seems that's the case, and they sort of latch on to this party because it's the virtuous thing, and then it turns out to be just the opposite of that. And as you said, yeah, it is a lot of religious fervor, and it's misguided.
Yeah. These people were raised. A lot of these people were raised by the helicopter parents who didn't let their kids out of their sight, and they have that going for them. There's also the weird effects of the elite institution. Like, if you can get into one of the top 10 best universities in the country, then you're set, right? It's no longer, you can still go out and like work your way up through the businesses and other things like everyone else normally does. But there is this kind of elite caste that has formed in the United States out of those 10 schools, and they all act like a French aristocracy in the 17th century.
Yeah, look how well that worked out.
Yeah, and that's probably what's going to happen, is that, although hopefully not as bloody, but I do think that's coming, where these people will be replaced by another more aggressive group of people.
Well, people who are more competent.
Yeah.
I think that's,
I mean, there's nothing more, the most privileged thing I think I've ever heard anyone ever say is words are violence.
And if you're too much of a cupcake to to be exposed to anything that might upset you, what good are you out in the world? And 8 semesters of woke studies. I mean, how do you make money with that?
You get the government to give it to you.
Yeah, that only goes so far.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Can we do anything about that? I don't know. I don't think so. Well, there's several aspects of it. Do we really think it's the college indoctrination?
It starts much earlier.
Would it happen without college?
It starts much earlier than college education. It's in like primary schools now.
I know when I was in college, I had no idea what was going on politically.
And that's the majority of people don't. That's the thing. It's just certain places where it's happening. It's happening amongst the wealthy elite and those who want to be that wealthy elite that's having the situation happen to them. I think one of the big problems that has caused this to happen is we're too rich. And this will get resolved when partly is already happening with the pandemic, when the government has been exposed for being really stupid and incompetent, and you have all these people fleeing to Florida and Texas because they're like, we can't live under these people. And so you have that kind of self-segregation going on. But also I think it is just a matter of, like what we said, another group of people is going to come in here, and it looks like Generation Z is already kind of that group of people. The most right-wing people I know on financial and job-related stuff all watch Ben Shapiro and are getting indoctrinated via him. Like, so there is kind of the next generation is like, we're not going to put up with this crap from the millennials. They're crazy.
Yeah, well, another scary factor is the fact that, the Chinese are a ruthless meritocracy. I mean, there's no affirmative action over there. And we're just not operating on that basis. I mean, just not the best and the brightest.
Yeah. I mean, in Canada, I've been complaining to people because of how bad our pandemic response has been. And the reason our response is so bad is because we're just like we're a big, dumb, happy country, and we've never had to deal with this. Versus, I remember one of the early National Review articles about the pandemic when talking about Florida and DeSantis, and the article is like, the reason why we're so good is we get hit by hurricanes every year. We cannot afford to be this complacent when our cities are getting destroyed on a regular basis. And you've noticed that in a lot of the other countries that had the best pandemic responses. South Korea, they got North Korea on their border. Taiwan, China's always there. Israel is surrounded by all their enemies. These are the countries that did well because they do have no room for margin of error. And all these Western countries like United States and Canada have plenty of room to screw up. We're complaining about the wealthy wokesters. Our countries are the wealthy wokesters of the world. Yeah. We live in countries that behave just like rich kids who go out and expect their parents to bail them out because they can do it. Like a poor kid a poor black kid goes out and gets a bag of weed and gets arrested and can go to jail for 10 years. But the rich white kid gets daddy sending the corporate lawyer to bail them out. And that's kind of...
Well, a simpler explanation for the poor quality of the COVID response is that in the areas with the bad response, it was simply not possible politically to tell the simple truth that there's not a great deal we can do about this. Suck it up and deal with it, and it will pass.
Yeah, that's pretty much Canada.
Instead, it had to be, yes, we can fix it. Just pat on the head, do this nonsense, do that nonsense, and somehow we're all in it together. Okay. I mean, that pablum instead of a truth. Whereas in some of these other places, a little bit more hard-nosed. I mean, they could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going into the grocery store and hearing we're all in this together, and I'm like, I recognized World War II propaganda when I hear it. Jesus.
Yeah. And the thing about the COVID thing is that we've learned how to deal with it. We've learned how it gets around. We know that vitamin D and E, I guess, keep it back, make you less susceptible. We know if you're in good health, it's less likely even to happen. We know that how to, a whole bunch of ways to cure it once you got it, and we know that it's hard to transmit unless you're in close spaces. If you're outdoors, hey, sunlight. We know the sunlight kills it. We know that washing your hands kills it. That's not awful.
Yeah, but I know parents who are terrified that their kids get it and will get, even though there's like no kids in the world have ever gotten it, giving it to their parents, apparently. I know parents who are terrified their kids are going to get it and die. And it's like, this disease doesn't do that. The flu is 10 times more likely to kill your kids than this. Yep. But that's what they believe because they're rational.
Yeah, there was a little clip from Bill Maher. I don't know if you saw that. He was chiding liberals, citing a study which said that some ridiculous percentage of liberals believe that 50% of all COVID, cases wind up in the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so immersed in that, panic porn that,
yeah.
That's my grandson, if you can hear him yelling.
Oh, yeah. And I can hear him, not the mythological airplane of Don's.
I've had 4 of them this beginning come by.
Yeah, we don't have too many quiet times in this house. We've had 8 kids. We're up to 12 grandkids and 1 more by marriage. So, people bring their dogs and cats with them. So
we love that.
Yeah. Only wish I had something like that around, but I mean, I'm just so terrible. I grew up in the countryside with a dog, and I can't imagine having one in my condo building. I just think it's cruel. Plus, dogs are really scarce around here now. It's hard to get them.
Really?
Yeah. There were weird attempts at puppy mills and all sorts of things. Like, people are talking about how dogs, some friends of mine in Vancouver said you can't leave your dog in your car anymore. People will steal them.
How bizarre.
Yeah.
That's strange. Uh, so, really, let's see. Well, what do you want to pick a topic? Anyone? You mentioned some things about economics. Where are your? I'm sorry.
I was talking about law and economics. I mean, it's
Law
a
and economics.
school of thought. For example, there are mathematical analyses as to why there is no rule in common law that a duty to rescue. So, I mean, if I see you fall in a river and I have a rope handy, or I even have an inner tube or whatever, and I don't rescue you, you can't sue me. I mean, and the whole reason for that as to how that would affect behaviors. If there is a duty to rescue, then people who are idiots would be even more idiots because they're counting on everybody else to bail them out. And so society would overinvest in, protective measures because of that. And these guys have looked at the common law as it's evolved over centuries with the theory that ultimately the rules that come into effect are dictated more by economic realities than anything else. And same with contract law and so on. It's, there is kind of an invisible hand at work in the evolution of the common law, which, you wouldn't necessarily get in the statutes, but it was, it was very interesting. And the things that come up there were, I thought, eye-opening. And
like we got rid of child labor. We brought in child labor laws because we were rich enough that we didn't need child labor anymore.
Well, but that was more of a political, and a legislative thing. When I'm talking about common law is judge-made law. So in, English countries, I mean, if you want to sue somebody for, slipping on a sidewalk or whatever, you don't go to the statute books. You go to other cases that are similar because that's where the law lives. It doesn't live in what legislatures did. And, and how that
Not
evolved.
the French.
Yeah, exactly. There's no code for everything. And, it's an interesting phenomenon. But anyway, I thought that was one of the benefits of being a George Mason and being a conservative. And also in classes to see liberals rebel at some of these ideas. Why shouldn't everybody be made to do the right thing in the moment? Think it through. Think of all the behaviors that you're mandating, and is it worth it? So.
Yeah, that reminds me of a little problem I'm having at work. I started a job as assistant condo manager, and our heating system. Get this. Every floor has a master control unit, and they dictate the results of what the heat, whether it's on heat or cold for the rest of the floor.
No, I see where this is going.
And supposedly the idea is that you're supposed to democratically vote, and that person will respond to all the other people's putting in their numbers, and it will average out. But that's not what happens. One person rules over the rest. And it's just wow, who thought that was a good idea? But, someone who probably thinks that people will be egalitarian and equal and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, no, that's not how people behave. Have you not met people?
Yeah, I think condos and co-ops are sort of exhibit A for people opposed to democracy. So.
Yeah. It's a good tagline for this show.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly how I got the job, because I was on all these political boards, and I'm like, well, I already know how to handle people in that context, and then I'm dealing with these people. But so just I'm thinking. Now you said you were going to conservative at George at the university at a young age. When did you know, or was it just a upbringing? How did you realize you weren't like all the other kids?
Well, I don't know. When I was in the 9th grade, I think I was a Democrat in the, probably Hubert Humphrey mold. Thought that Barry Goldwater was over the top, but that didn't last very long. And on the Vietnam War, my position was that the extremists are right. Either get out or, win it. But to muddle along, with this half-assed plan is just immoral. And anyway.
And I thought the same thing when I was young. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we're not going to bomb the hell out of them, and if we're not going to end this, then stop now.
Yep.
But after that, it was I think just more a question of growing up, of reading and learning, real world experiences, marriage, mortgage, kids, and I think too the left changed, quite a bit.
Yeah.
It was. I remember my younger brothers when they were like 11 or 12 years old. They were actually running a headquarters for the Muskie campaign when he was running for the nomination. And my another one of those brothers, who's deceased now, he was lobbyist for the Right to Life movement for quite a while. He knew pretty much everybody, I think, on the Hill. One of the few people who had actually read and understood the Jefferson Manual on Procedure. He was quite good at it. And another brother had a minor job in the Reagan White House, and knew quite a few people. And I think we all came out of kind of a Irish Catholic Democratic but conservative Democratic background.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess would have been considered Reagan Democrats.
Well, we're watching the great shakeup of the political parties now. It's like every something like 70 or 80 years, the political parties kind of go through a big shakeup and end up looking different than how they started. And Trump was part of the initial part of that thing. But I think it really started more under Gingrich when he started saying some of the things during his 2012 run. That was really the thing. And then Trump was just a more purified version of him.
Yeah, well, Gingrich's presidential run was, ineffectual. His maneuvers in the '94 congressional elections were brilliant, and never given enough credit for just how significant that was. And I say that as somebody who knew and liked Bob Michael and his staff. Who's always remembered as sort of the quintessential Rhino, Republican leader, but an eminently decent man. But Gingrich's achievement in that regard, I think, was really amazing. But mostly, I think parties reorganized because the greatest advantage a political party has is its opposition, right? I mean, the other guys are idiots too, and they're going to miss the point, or they're going to cling to a certain defined coalition well after it's useless, and and that creates opportunities.
Yeah, I remember watching after what we were talking about, the second Reichstag fire, and I'm like, well, I guess the Democrats are going to, and then they're, second impeachment, eh? Well, I'm not going to stop you from, you just squandered your thing. You got handed this thing, and you're squandering it already. Oh, wow.
Second impeachment.
It's like, yeah, it's just,
Funny.
Yeah. Like, he's not even in office anymore. Like, how do you think this is going to go?
I like how they brought in the guy who boasted about doing the very thing that they impeached Trump for the first time.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no sense in any of that.
Mm-hmm.
None.
I mean, even when he still had all his faculties, Joe Biden was a buffoon. I mean, but this is pathetic.
Yep. Hey, we could be they nearly caused war with Russia in the last month. No one's even really talked about that on Ricochet. I was a little surprised by that. I kept meaning to, but like I said, I started the job and there's just stuff going on. But yeah, apparently some apparatchik in the National Security Council goaded the Ukrainians into trying to invade the Donbass. And Russia moved up 100,000 men and said, if you do this, we're going to take the entire country.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, the Chinese seem to be flexing their muscles. The North Koreans are laughing at us. The mullahs are pushing. You just can't have that much weakness, that much apparent weakness.
Well, I don't think they're actually doing it for that. I beg to differ. I think they understand that Biden's not in charge, and I think they understand that Obama's people, at least to a first approximation, are really in charge.
Whatever the cause, they sense weakness. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's certainly not the strength of Trump.
Yeah, and
because it's being run by a group of people. I mean, it doesn't have the solidity of one man in charge.
Right, but Trump had a similar advantage to what Reagan had, and that is his enemies were so intent on calling him, a violent, dangerous Hitler, that, once he got in, I mean, I think some of that rubbed off and scared people, like, well, he may actually do something. And, I mean, Reagan was not at all aggressive in any way, and yet, you got, hey, yeah, what are you doing? Get out of here.
yeah.
We love the dogs.
Yep. Yeah, it reminds me of Reagan's. It is a bit of a story of Reagan's aggressiveness, but Peter Robinson told this story once, and he's like, apparently Reagan's in charge, and Libya has been doing stuff, and he's brought into the meeting room, and they're starting to explain the rules of engagement to him on these things, and like, well, we don't follow the Libyans back in their airspace, blah blah blah. What are the rules of engagement? And Reagan's like, I don't care if you go to all the way to their bleeping airfields if you have to. We need to stop this. And it does remind. It was something I read after. In the 2001 response, it's like after 9/11, you had all this great encouragement of the growth of the state apparatus to do things. And there was like a series of terrorist bombings in the middle of the 80s that brought down like 4 airplanes in a month, and Reagan's response was just to bomb the airfields and go after the actual terrorists, and nothing happened to the airlines, and they didn't create this new federal bureaucracy.
Yep.
Anyways, do you have a favorite Reagan story we might be able to go out on?
I had a few, but I'm drawing a blank. Got them from my brother, who was a great repository of that stuff. But
well, I have to get going. I have an appointment I have to hit.
Okay, no problem. Well, then maybe maybe my story will be the one that we'll go out on.
Yeah,
well,
it's been that one.
Great spending an hour talking to you and learning about a little bit more about you, and meeting your parrot and hearing the dog.
Yeah, and your menagerie of animals.
Yep. Okay, well, I'll leave us there. Okay. So, bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks much. Take care.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.